Yeah.
Let me just ask you a couple things. First of all, the chapel by the lake. What do you think ultimately led the developers to say, let's sit on it for 2 months?
What do I think ultimately?
Led the developers to say, let's call it a day and come back in a couple months.
I didn't have the vote. I think, I think they saw the writing on the wall and that compromise was going to have to be something to consider again. It's more compromise.
It looked like I think they had hoped that this offer of this carrot in the form of this submerged land might turn the tide for some of the commissioners that still were kind of against them. But
I think they were led to believe that.
Yeah. And but it sounded like it raised more questions than answers. So, some of the commissioners wanted to know more about it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
But I think I don't know if all of the commissioners have been met with, but I think most of the commissioners knew about it before Monday night.
Right. Now, you had made it very clear, and I think Commissioner James said the same thing. You had to kind of remind the audience that ultimately, even if you don't personally like the development, if it follows all the rules, you have to approve it. But of course, it doesn't follow all the rules. There's some waivers you're going to have to.
Yeah, and waivers, you'll grant waivers based on a set of standards, not on whether people like it or not. So you really have to use those standards to guide your decision making. As much as we like to hear from the public and want to know what they think, ultimately the decision has to be, do these waivers meet the standards that are set forth?
And right now, they don't appear to.
Well, the standards are subjective. That's what makes it a little trickier. And, certainly one of the standards that they look at is, is this an innovative project? The historical waivers that were presented, while most of them were not in the same locale, being east of Flagler, at least one of them was, and that's the watermark. And the waivers were not that different from those given to the watermark.
So they may be able to argue that you've already granted it once.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
but not, they gave other examples that were clearly clearly on the west side of Flagler that I have absolutely agree with the public that I don't think that that's comparing apples with apples.
No, like a Trump.
Yeah.
Where there's a big amphitheater in the middle.
Yeah.
In between.
It's.
Now, what do you think they'll have to do in the next 2 months to make this work for them?
I wish I had a crystal ball. I think definitely making the tower smaller. But it's very hard, because even if they lowered it 5 stories, you and I wouldn't know the difference if we were walking along Flagler, if it was 5 stories bigger or smaller. They're big buildings. So I don't really know. It would be hard for me to give them advice at this point.
Okay. Do you want to take a guess on whether ultimately it'll pass?
No.
Okay.
I didn't know it was going to happen Monday night.
Yeah.
Really, and I would, when I talked to people who are good vote counters and outside of the process, they couldn't tell me either. So I think it was, nobody really knew what was going to happen.
Have you been surprised at the passion that this has generated? Because this is not the first time there's been a controversial development in the city, but it just seems...
No, I'm not surprised at all. The first time I met with the developers, I told them that they had an uphill battle and that I really would be surprised if it got approved. And that was the first time I told them, first time I met with them. It's a very special place, and it evokes a lot of emotion from people.
Okay. All right. Another subject very quickly. You had another meeting on Thursday with the mayors of the other cities. A lot of the talk was about this flea market.
Right.
You can't just go in there and shut them down.
No, you cannot.
But you haven't exactly been getting a lot of cooperation from the owners and the managers.
Right.
So what's the city's strategy going forward?
Well, I'm not going to I can't really tell you our strategy, but I can, just because we don't want everybody to know what the strategy is. But our strategy is to make sure that there are no code violations, to make sure that all the business licenses are in place, to make sure that our police are policing it on a regular basis, and to continue to work with the owner to see what we can do. You know, if it comes to a point where we can declare it a chronic nuisance, then we'll continue to work on that, or, you know, have to do nuisance abatement. But the people, the owners and the people who work there have due process rights, and we're going to respect those. The complicating factor is that there's a lot of individual businesses
Right.
that are sitting in this place
Right.
because of the nature of the flea market.
Not to mention the fact that a portion of it is in another city.
Yeah, but they tell us that that's not where the bad stuff occurs. I think I heard the Mangonia Park mayor say that his area was okay.
But just being a high crime area isn't enough to shut something down,
No.
because there'd be a lot of places that would get shut.
We have to, you know, we have to address the crime issues, and we have, you know, you know as well as I, it's preventative as well as taking action when there's crime taking place there.
Okay.
You know, I have to tell you, I was a little disappointed. You're going to kill me for saying this, Elliot. But, you know, we had a county commissioner there, and the county commission just voted down $50,000 for our youth empowerment center, which does the very thing we want to see happen: get kids out of the life of crime, support them getting high school diplomas and moving forward in a productive way. And if you start taking money out of those preventative things, then you're going to have to deal with the consequences of the behavior when it occurs.
Okay. The Open Sky.
Mm-hmm.
There's a draft out there. What's the next step?
You know, we're going back and forth. I think, you know, I'm going out to the consortium this afternoon to chat with some people and take a look around and visit. But, you know, we're moving forward. It's a typical negotiation. You know, we've got a back and forth going.
Any guess on when you'll finally reach some kind
Oh,
of
soon, I hope. I've been dealing with this for 2.5 years, and it's time that we put it to bed.
Is it something we could maybe see wrapped up by the end of the year, or probably beginning of the year?
I hope by the end of the year.
Okay.
We have to, you know, we have to figure out how we're going to finance the purchase of the P25 system. We've got a couple of options that we're looking at.
Okay. Next topic real quick, the golf clubhouse, you've put out RFQs for renovation or tear down or whatever. You know, you've got a lot of options still. Where does that stand?
Well, we put out 2 RFQs. One RFQ is for somebody like an owner's rep to come in and take a look at it and do an assessment and give us his or her estimate on what it would cost to renovate. The other RFQ is to ask for people who might want to renovate. So the commission has been very strong in supporting renovation rather than a rebuild. I think it's going to cost us a whole lot of money to renovate. And we're going to have to make a decision as to whether it's will be better to renovate or to build a new one.
Okay. Last question. You know the issue of the settlement with this police incident, and some of the commissioners were felt pretty strongly that you know.
One commissioner.
Right, but there's 2 ways you can look at it. One is, why do you keep having these incidents, and the other is, we're cracking down on them. We're trying to stop them from happening in the future. And of course, you know, the answer is somewhere in between. You know, the chief has said that some of these incidents are coming to light because he is trying to crack down.
Well, and do you know that one we dealt with on Monday night was 4 years old, way before this chief ever got here. And all of the commissioners except one had a meeting prior where everything was explained.
Okay. Do you feel that you have a, Commissioner James used the word a culture, and that's, I think there's concern in the public that there's still a culture, not all the officers, but there still seems to be a culture where some officers still are doing things that they shouldn't. And you can crack down on the ones who do it, and then another incident happens.
Yeah. I don't think it's a culture. I think this police chief has done an amazing job. And I think there are a few people who have to be addressed. And that's what he's doing. I don't see it as a permeating culture. I have great respect for our police officers. They do an outstanding job, and I'm proud of them. But we have, 300 officers? And if 2 or 3 need to be redirected in the way they deal with things, I don't think that's a cultural issue.
Yeah, having said that, residents read that they're going to have to pay $140,000 because a policeman did something wrong. I mean, that's not fun.
No, it's not, and it shouldn't be happening, and what he did was wrong. And we have a challenge. The other challenge is disciplining police officers. As soon as we feel as if we have an officer that needs to be disciplined, then we have to also deal with the courts and the union representative. It's a very complicated system.